our success in transcending the ego is guaranteed by God, and I share this confidence for both of us and all of us. I bring God's peace back to all His children because I received it of Him for us all. Nothing can prevail against our united wills because nothing can prevail against God's. The outcome is as certain as God, twice quoted earlier in the text, because His will has never not been united, joining the sonship in His peace. How can we not be successful in overcoming the separation that never happened? Jesus' love ensures that we remember this happy truth, and so He asks us again, would you know the will of God for you? Ask it of me who know it for you, and you will find it. I will deny you nothing, as God denies me nothing. So simple, and yet our fear makes it so very difficult to accept. Asking Jesus' help means releasing our need to be special, which prompts us to resist the call to take His hand on the journey through the ego back to God, from mindlessness to mindfulness. Our terror of finding the self we truly seek exasperates the conflicted relationship with the one who denies us nothing, and whose love promises us the peace and happiness for which our right minds yearn. Ours is simply the journey back to God, who is our home. Whenever fear intrudes anywhere along the road to peace, it is because the ego has attempted to join the journey with us and cannot do so. Sensing defeat and angered by it, the ego regards itself as rejected and becomes retaliative. We will consider this thought in greater depth in the chapter to follow, where the theme of the ego's viciousness and retaliative nature is explored. In truth, of course, the ego does not do anything, for it is an expression of the fear our separated selves experience when we let go of its thought system. We need to remember that the physical universe, including the life we think of as our own, rests on the thought that God's love is to be feared. Even more to the point, our minds choosing this love is to be feared. That terrifying thought is embedded in our genes. Our DNA do not accept atonement, as it were. This is essential to keep in mind because the need to preserve our special identity explains the underlying resistance to this course and to Jesus as our teacher. It also accounts for our attempts to blend Him with our thought system, rather than blending ourselves with His so that the ego would disappear. This helps us to understand how otherwise well-meaning followers of Jesus can practice lives of judgment and attack and believe they are being faithful to their Prince of Peace. You are invulnerable to its retaliation because I am with you. The problem, one more time, is that Jesus is the problem. We say to Him, I do not want you with me. I want my version of you with me. We certainly do not want a Jesus whose presence represents the undoing of our special self. And in this insanity, we are willing to choose vulnerability and pain so as to blame others, justifying our unforgiveness by placing the blame on them. Yet Jesus pleads with us to choose His thought system of invulnerability, for therein lies our only hope for true peace and lasting joy. On this journey, you have chosen me as your companion instead of the ego. Do not attempt to hold on to both, or you will try to go in different directions and will lose the way. We saw the mutual exclusivity of Jesus and the ego at the beginning of this chapter. This is a one-handed course in the sense that we can take the hand of Jesus or the ego, but not both. If we choose Jesus, there is no ego, and vice versa. We are delusional if we think we can hold both at once. One or the other remains the rule of the split mind and precludes the ego's magical attempts at combining the forms of attack with the content of peace. The ego's way is not mine, but it is also not yours. The Holy Spirit has one direction for all minds. The one He taught me is yours. We see how often Jesus refers to the principle of one or the other and asks us not to bring Him into our specialness. Rather, we are to bring our specialness to Him. I just want to pause and say religion is trying to bring Jesus into our specialness. This means looking at it with His love beside us and seeing how much we cherish and worship the special self we are convinced is our identity. Everything about us, our problems, idiosyncrasies, as well as what we consider to be our virtues, is an intrinsic part of the thought system of separation that constitutes what we believe to be our attack on God. Our real fear, however, is not of God's counterattack, as the ego would allege, but of the decision-making minds no longer choosing to believe in attack of any kind. Let us not lose sight of His direction through illusions, for only illusions of another direction can obscure the one for which God's voice speaks in all of us. Never accord the ego the power to interfere with the journey. It has none, because the journey is the way to what is true. Leave all illusions behind and reach beyond all attempts of the ego to hold you back. These are the words the ego hates to hear because they deny its tales of great power and wisdom, the grandiose lies to which it urges us to listen. It does not want us to understand that it has no power at all, being the repository of the mind's investment in sin and guilt. Thus, the ego's fear of the mind's investing in the atonement principle in its insane attempts to convince us of its own strength. As a correction to this madness, Jesus says, never accord the ego the power to interfere with the journey. It has none. He asks us instead to be aware of the ego's feeble efforts to hold us back from the truth. Recall that the ego is not a devil or an entity operating in the mind, but is only our separated self being terrified of losing its specialness. Jesus tells us to recognize this fear of coming with Him on the journey home. The fear of letting the ego go and releasing our investment in anger, conflict, and the belief that one or the other is salvation. I go before you because I am beyond the ego. Reach, therefore, for my hand because you want to transcend the ego. My strength will never be wanting, and if you choose to share it, you will do so. I give it willingly and gladly because I need you as much as you need me. This ends Jesus' love song to us, asking that we take His hand so He can lead us home. He does not need us the same way we need Him, obviously, but He cannot help us unless we choose to drop the ego's hand and hold His. And then, together with Him and all our brothers, we happily journey back to the love we never left.